David Brewster here, new episode of Chordplay. This is Walking Between the Chords, and this episode is going to feature a very interesting and inspiring form of jazz comping, which is, playing a chord progression, but you're also adding a bass line, where you're literally walking between the chords. And this is really interesting. It's been around for a long time, definitely pioneered, by the late great jazz guitarist Joe Pass. But then more recently, there's guitarists like Andress and Charlie Hunter, and some other players that have adapted this style to their music, and it's really inspiring, really musical. It gives the illusion of a bassist and a guitarist playing together, which is so cool. But here's an image with some pioneers and players that have adapted and used this in their music. So as far as the word I just used, comping, or jazz comping, that's basically rhythm guitar, or rhythm, rhythm and chords behind a soloist. And that's kind of the definition of what comping is. It's what a musician plays behind a soloist that's playing a solo or a melody or something like that. But here's an image with the definition of comping. After you've worked through this video, if you want to dive a little deeper, I actually had a lesson with Premier Guitar. That would have been March of 2016 with Walk the Line, and that's another kind of introduction to this style of playing. And there's some different examples that are contained in this lesson. But if you want to dive a little deeper, check out my lesson with Premier Guitar. And then if you really want to do a deep dive, I highly recommend Tuck Andress's classic Hot Licks instructional video from back in the day. I think that was like in the early 90s. But that video will blow your mind. He goes through so much, with this style and type of playing. But I highly recommend this instructional video. It's great. To get started here, we're just going to do some basic moves and literally walk through some of this material, pun intended. But we're just going to slowly, start adding some bass notes and movements. The next thing you know, you're going to start adding, some bass lines. And at the end, I'm going to break down what I played, during the intro. But to get started here, let's just do a two-chord vamp or, a progression. And we're going to do B minor 7 right here. And then we're going to move to E9. So minor 1 to major 4. And if you've been watching the channel here, you realize that's a Dorian progression. Minor 1 to major 4 definitely serves up that Dorian tonality. It's that major 6th that really kind of brings out that sound. So that's definitely jazz approved. Dorian's in a lot of jazz music. And also Carlos Santana and some other people too. But what we're going to do there is, you could bar with a single finger for this type of playing, and there are situations where you do want to do that single finger bar. But for me, I found, separating, like say, the bass note of the chord with the remainder of the chord above it, it seems a little bit easier, especially when you start moving and you have, fingers that you can reach, lower notes and higher notes. So you're going to definitely kind of rework your barring and chordal approach with this style, because it's a little different. You don't want to lock into a bar chord. You want to be able to move around and start moving notes. So right there, just grab the root note with your middle finger and then bar the top part with your third finger and separate the notes of that chord, the bass, from the rest. And then the same thing with E9. Play that bass note and then the top part of the chord right there. And this first example is just separating that bass note from the chord. Really simple, but you're getting that bass note, kind of in your mind by separating it, from the rest of the chord. So next up, we're going to actually introduce a bass note from below, so lower than the root note of B and lower than the root note of E. So we're literally just going to grab this A and then move to B and then grab that chord like that, and then do the same thing right here for E9 and do D to E like that. And you can change the rhythm. Simple. And then we could flip that and we could actually approach from above. And there I want you to grab C sharp back to B and then F sharp to E. actually reveal the next variation, and we're going to add a chromatic note before that bass note. So we're going to grab A, and then A sharp, and then slide into that B, and then grab that B minor 7. And then the same thing on the E, grab D sharp, slide into the E, and then grab that top part of E9, like this. Right? And you can probably hear like I'm doing a little quick hit in there. Right? That like the little, like an extra little hit on that chord. Like a little bit of rhythmic, interest right there. You can play it completely straight. But then you add that little quick hit, and it kind of adds a little bit more, kind of a little extra something in there. Like a little rhythmic twist. It's really cool. Let's do the same thing but from above. So we're going to grab that C sharp, move it to C, and then slide to B, and then grab that B minor 7. And then on the E chord, we're going to grab F sharp to F, and then slide that F to E, and then grab that E9. So we're doing this. Slight variation. You can play from below, or you can play from above. So let's combine those two and see what it sounds like when we do notes from below and the notes from above in the same progression, like this. Totally mix that up. Let's do notes from below on B, notes from above on the E9, and then notes from above on the B, and then notes from below on the E9. So we're going to mix and match like this. Right? You're just finding some different ways of navigating, between those two chords, B minor 7 and E9. Let's move a little bit further, and we're going to flesh out an actual bass line, and then we're going to start adding chords to the bass line. So the bass line itself I'm thinking of is that really typical kind of chromatic bass line like this. Right there, I just arranged it on the low E so you can see it, because it's B, C sharp, D, D sharp to E, and then G sharp, A sharp, and you start it again. And that's not really going to work for this chord approach, so we're going to have to modify that bass line and not play it, on a single string like that. And we can do it like this. Same bass line. But I just added some of those little chord hits, in there. And that bass line could have been anything, but that's the one that I chose. But then I found a way to kind of do that with the chords mixed. So let's do that again, but use a different bass line. Let's play this one. So B to D, F sharp, F to E, and then G sharp, A to A sharp, and you just loop it and start walking around like that. Now let's add the chords. want to use, it's kind of a quick hit that I'm using there on those chords. Right? I'm not really letting the chords ring. I mean, you could experiment with letting them ring a little bit longer, but the most important thing here is, you know, between the bass line of the chords, the bass line is crucial. You don't want to mess up the bass line. You want to keep that flowing and going. And even if you mess up a chord, it's okay, because you don't want to drop that bass line, because it's really noticeable when you mess it up. The chord hits aren't really as noticeable so much. You can kind of play around with those a little bit, but you obviously want an even balance between, you know, the bass notes and the chord hits. And that's a good example right there. Right, you're just kind of sneaking those hits in there. Players do with this is they'll start doing a bounce with those bass notes to an open string like this. Which sounds really cool. It starts giving it more movement and activity. And I'm literally just bouncing. Like that, you know, from the open A on that low E, and it just sounds really cool, kind of mixed in there. So now I'm going to break down what I use for the intro, like, you know, the beginning of the video. And this is extended, we're in a different key, kind of shaking things up a little bit, and this is going beyond just a 2-chord vamp that we were kind of working with and looking at. So now we're going to be in the key of G, and we're going to line up the series of chords. There's a lot more chords in this progression. So it's G13 right here, and then A minor 7, B minor 7, E 7 sharp 9, the Hendrix chord, go back to that A minor 7, and then D 7 sharp 9, the Hendrix chord, and then end either on that G13. I think I actually ended on like a G major 7, you know, like that. Kind of did the harp harmonics in there too. But that's the progression: G major, or, you know, G13, A minor 7, B minor 7, E7 sharp 9, A minor 7, D7 sharp 9, and then end on G, or G major 7. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start walking between those chords. So there's, you know, one note between that G13 and A minor 7. A minor 7, then there's one note between A minor 7 and B minor 7, right there. So we literally just walked up, you know, with the bass line, but we did it like that. And then when we do this E7 sharp 9, the Hendrix chord, we're going to go from above. So grab that F, and then E7 sharp 9. The same thing with A minor 7, go from above, you know, it's A sharp to A minor 7. The same thing with that D, grab that D sharp to D7 sharp 9. And then the same thing at the end, G sharp to G. And something like that. So really slow. You can start bouncing through there. But you don't really want to bounce like on every single bass note, just occasionally. You want to kind of throw that in there, because it really adds. You know, if you do it too much, it takes away. It's like, okay, you're bouncing on every note. Just every once in a while, kind of throw that bounce in there. And then I also added a turnaround in there. So that was G13, E7 sharp 9, that A minor 7, and then a D7 sharp 9. So that you could also end on just D9 if you wanted to. I think that's actually what I was doing for the turnaround. But you could do that D7 sharp 9, but I think I was flipping it to D9 there. That's basically a 1, 6, 2 to 5. Very common progression, especially in jazz. approved for sure. And then I actually ended with G major 7 with the harp harmonic backwards, you know, something like that. That's a really cool progression, and it's a showstopper. You know, you can definitely play that for somebody and they're going to be like, wow, because it sounds super jazzy and authentic. That's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with Walking Between the Chords, and this is really just an introduction. I kind of threw out some different ideas and approaches and some things to think about. Definitely check out my Premier Guitar lesson and also Tuck Andress's video if you want to dive deeper. And there's so much you can do with this technique. I'm also surprised that there's very little information and instructional material surrounding this. As cool as it is, I'm surprised there isn't a mountain of material out there to work with. But there's just little bits and pieces and glimpses into this type of playing. And it's so cool. So definitely dive in, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to my lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.